So for whoever is attending, thank you very much for joining our first webinar about energy. Today we have got as a speakers Nicholas and Andy. They are both from HBSL. They are our expert in the sector. We collaborate alongside HBSL and use them as a third party, as a consultancy that we recommend and we put in touch with. Talking a little bit on Nicholas. Nicholas has been in the sector of energy, if I'm correct, for the last 15 years at least. And before that, he was in the hospitality industry. So he completely understands our world, where we're coming from, the needs of the business, and what could be useful for the business to navigate this timing. In regards to Andy, he is the master in he's been all his life in the energy sector. He knows the industry inside out, and he will give a great knowledge and insight of the market at the moment. I think that without further ado from me, I give the words to Nicholas, and he can start the webinar's presentation.
Okay, thank you, Mariana, and good afternoon, everyone. Today we're going to try and help you to understand the energy sector, to understand what's happening in the sector right now, and to guide and navigate you as best we can as to how you can manage your energy in the future. And that comes in three parts. There's procurement of your energy, and then managing how much energy you use, and finally, how you can generate your own energy. So those three elements will collectively manage your total energy policy. So we're going to be starting off with procurement and what's been happening over the last 2 years in terms of buying energy and how that has affected the cost of energy, not only in the UK, but on a global basis. At this point, I'm going to hand over to Andy, who will give you a background as to the background of energy, what's happened over the last 18 months, 18 months to 2 years, and what's going to be happening now and what is the likelihood for the future. So, Andy, over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Andy Powell. I work for a company called Open Energy Market, and we work with Nicholas to help people navigate the issues of energy procurement in the volatile markets we find ourselves. I'm going to attempt to share my screen, so if you could bear with me a second whilst I try and work this one out. So hopefully you can now see a screen that says Open Energy Market, energy efficiency for the hospitality businesses. Can you see a screen that starts with overview of 2022?
Yes, we can. All good.
Where I want to start really is a quick look back over what was the single most volatile period we've ever had in the energy market. This looks at 2022 in its entirety. I won't go over the kind of main things, but the first area here was the invasion of the Ukraine. This area here is when Nord Stream 1, which was the main gas supply from Germany to Russia, was blown up or had suffered from an unexplained explosion. But you'd be forgiven to look at this and think actually it started off at around about 200. We're back to about 200, so we're over it now. We're back to where we were. What I've actually done is just brought forward a snapshot of what it looked like since the energy market deregulated. Here's the same information but shown from 2009. What you can see is that between 2022 and now is the single most volatile period we've ever had in the energy market. It looks like absolutely nothing happened until the last 12 months. Now, I do not believe we're going to see a period like the last 12 months again, but I do think we're going to be in an increasingly volatile market. The key to energy, electricity, whatever it is gas. What we have on the screen here is a Qmax tanker, which is a LNG tanker that can float anywhere in the world, delivering a gas cargo, which predominantly is used to either generate electricity, heating, or process. As at 11:40 a.m. today, 20% of all of our electricity was being generated by burning gas. That is normally in the 50s. However, solar and wind are doing quite well today. One thing to point out, and I'll come to later, we're actually only generating 82% of the electricity we need, or we were. It shows here where we're importing energy from. So the biggest single importer of energy is France. We're taking 9.1% of our required energy via the French interconnectors. I'll come on to why that's important a little later. What we have here is a look at the demand for power in the UK. We are the white line that you can see towards the left of the screen. The blue line here is COVID, and the blue line above it is 2022. What this is telling us was the demand for energy dropped to COVID lockdown levels during the height of the energy pricing last year, because people were either being very cautious about how they were using energy. Unfortunately, some businesses went out of business and less profitable production lines were mothballed. The key part of our energy security as we sit here now is LNG gas. It used to be piped Russian gas, coming through several pipelines from Russia. The only one of which I believe is still flowing, quite strangely, is the one that runs through the Ukraine. All of the others, I believe, have been turned off. And that gas for mainland Europe, which made up 40% of the gas demand, has been replaced by tankered gas. Tankered gas historically, the biggest competitor has been Asia. Asia in this context being Japan, South Korea, and China. That's the black line here. What we are seeing, though, is more competition from Europe directly. So you've got TTF, which is the Netherlands, and PSV, which is Italy. Later on, we'll see a German indices appear here. But tankers historically had a choice. They could go towards Europe or they could go towards Asia. Now, many more European countries have built their own regasification terminals. So we are now in direct competition with mainland Europe for gas. It means that any shortage of gas anywhere in Europe will spike the LNG price, and we will have to match that price if we are to secure the tankers we desperately need to generate electricity. You can see in this period here, our price was significantly below that of mainland Europe. That was because at the time, mainland Europe had no real facilities to take big cargoes of gas. We were literally offloading the gas and pumping it into Europe and making billions of pounds of profits in the process. I don't think we're going to see this period again. The ones to watch moving forward are Asia, the black line, the blue line, and the green line. But this will be fundamental to what we pay for both gas and electricity moving forward. Just for a point of reference, you can see the Henry Hub price here. The US is a net exporter of LNG, and that is the price they're exporting it for. So there is no energy crisis in the US. It's an absolute bonanza for them at the moment. Moving on to European gas storage levels. This is crucial for anyone who may have a renewal between the 1st of April and the 1st of October. What we can see is we're entering what is classically the summer period in energy, the 1st of April to the 1st of October, which is also a period when we tend to inject into storage at record high storage levels or near record high storage levels. This is really good for pricing because it means there won't be so much demand for gas to pump into storage, and it should help push prices down. So this is relatively good news for us. There was talk last week and the week before of a beast from the east. I think that's passed. I think we should see over the coming weeks steady injections into storage, and we should, if this was the only factor, see prices coming down. I'll come on to some of the other factors in a moment. This has a look. This is looking at how gas is priced. Now, S23 is summer 23. That's gas to use between April and October. Winter 23 is October to April, and so on and so forth. So what you can see is a massive fall in prices from around about mid-December. We've actually been seeing electricity prices in the 20s again, and gas prices starting at 5p a unit. For the more eagle-eyed amongst you, what you will see is quite a significant uptick over the last few days across all of the pricing curves. There has been news that came out of France last week that the French nuclear generation fleet has a potential problem. That problem are corrosive cracks in the cooling towers. Now, if this problem is widespread enough, it could result in the shutting down of all of the French nuclear reactors whilst they go through a period of unplanned maintenance. As you saw from an earlier slide, we take 10% of our power, or are today taking 10% of our power from France. But more crucially, if France's nuclear generators aren't being used, they'll have to resort to gas generators, pushing up the price of European LNG and forcing the UK price to follow. The other piece of news that came out today, or rather early this week, about gas was there is still a significant amount of Russian LNG, so liquid natural gas on tankers, being bought by mainland Europe, namely France and Spain. The European Union are not really very keen on this, and they're asking them to kind of stop. That means that if that happens, all of that Russian gas needs to be replaced, on top of the Russian piped gas we've already had to replace. These are the two major things we're watching at the moment that are leading to price inflation. Whatever happens with regards to the French nukes and the Russian gas, we are definitely in a sustained period of volatility. The reason for this is tankered gas is significantly more difficult to get to where we needed it than piped gas was. There's the terminal that turns it into a liquid initially. There's the boat and the shipping across the sea, and there's the regasification. There are many, many, many more points where things could potentially go wrong than there was with piped gas. That doesn't mean we're going to see prices going up to here again, or at least I very much hope not, but we will see prices that move quite violently in terms of volatility. And that's what we've been seeing pretty much for the last 18 months. First of all, with supply issues caused from COVID, and then from the Russian invasion of the Ukraine. The next slide is the power graphs, and they're almost identical. What you will see, however, is on the longer term line, so summer 25, they're much more flat, or they're not so peaky. The reason is no one's really buying or selling this at the moment, so there's not that many data points to plot. But it follows gas very, very closely, even with the uptick that we've seen recently that you would have seen on the gas. When it comes to procurement and when you're buying energy, there's arguably two routes to go. Within those camps, so there's many different options that you consider. The traditional route that most people might be familiar with is fixed price procurement. With fixed price procurement, what you're doing is you're locking into a price. That price is made up of lots and lots of different pricing curves, as I showed you previously, giving you a blended price for the period that you take the contract for. And you may or may not include different transportation and taxation costs within that price. The issue with fixed procurement, or rather, let's start with the benefit. The benefit of fixed procurement is, all things being equal, the only variable should be the amount of energy you use. The issue with fixed procurement is, when do you go to market? You're making a 100% purchasing decision over that entire timeline on the day you sign the contract. There's no saying whether the price is going to go up, down, left or right, because the market is so volatile at the moment. All of the fundamentals are pointing that the gas and power prices should come down. And the news comes out of France that their reactors are having problems. Things like this are completely unpredictable and make fixed procurement very, very difficult. The alternative to this is flexible procurement. For those of you that aren't familiar with flexible procurement, what we do is we divide your purchasing decision into many, many small micro transactions. So we might be purchasing for summer 23, winter 23, or we might be purchasing for individual months or even individual days. What it enables you to do is to take small purchases across long time periods. So instead of buying 100% in one go, you might buy 50% of winter 23 today, 10% of summer 24, and so on and so forth, depending on the attitude to risk of the individual business. How that works in practice is like this. Forgive the fact this is summer 19. Prior to what we've seen recently, this was the last time when we saw a rising and falling market. The green line is the market cost of the gas. The grey blocks here is how much gas has been purchased up to 100% of the required volume. And the blue line is what the customer's paying through the price optimization in the flexible contract. The red dots here is when energy has been purchased. So as the market was moving up, we purchased more and more and more of the energy, getting to around about 80%. The market went up again and we purchased to 100%. Due to a change in fundamentals, so something significant changed within the gas market, the market started to fall. And as that price fell, we started selling back the energy we previously bought. You can see this grey area getting lower and lower and lower as more energy was sold back. As the market then continued to fall and towards getting nearer the point of delivery, we bought that energy back, resulting in a price that was below market average and at no point anywhere near the peak of the market. The key to this type of strategy is incremental purchasing. You purchase little and often on the way up, and you sell little and often on the way down, reducing the risk to the underlying client. Now, from our point of view, we don't have a preference whether a client is fixed or flex, but with every client we see, we start with a blank piece of paper, look at the options, look at what the customer is hoping to achieve, and go to them with a solution that's tailored to their particular needs. This is the performance of our flexible procured product called our fund. I can't show you individual customers, so this is our collective or our basket. The blue line at the top is the market price on the day, and that changes daily as the market fluctuates. The green dotted line is the average price for energy over the period, so over the 12-month period, and the red line is the price we achieved. So we hugely underperformed the market on the day and significantly underperformed the market average. Guys, that's all I've got to show today. I'm very conscious that this is quite a technical series of slides. Are there any questions or comments at all?
I can't see any question at the moment, but in case you can all drop a question on at the end when we finish in the chat, or if anyone wants to ask directly.
Thanks.
Okay, so at this point, if any of our listeners would like more detailed advice, reach out to Integra, who will then get us in contact with you so we can advise you on an individual basis. Each company has its own set of criteria, so there isn't a one-size-fits-all scenario. As Andy said, we always start with a blank sheet of paper and look at an individual business's energy needs and will advise accordingly. So I hope that that's given you some insight into the options surrounding procurement. Now we'll look at the issues around procurement in a little bit more detail in terms of how you make the decision as to where to buy. So you can buy direct from energy suppliers. If your team is big enough, you can have somebody dedicated within the company to reach out to all suppliers and look at contracts, which if that works for your organisation, that's perfectly well and good. However, if you choose to use a broker, you're really entering a little bit of a can of worms. At the moment, it's a deregulated industry. Any individual can become a broker. So how do you go about choosing a good one from a bad one? I think my recommendation here would be to go with a company that has been personally recommended and avoid people that are trying to pressurize you into making a decision. A good example, we were speaking to a client just before Christmas. This particular client, it was a golf club, and they were being put under pressure by different brokers to sign a contract before Christmas. Our advice was, look, you don't need to rush at the moment. There's enough time before your current contract expires, so hold fire and wait until the early part of 2023. That decision alone, they went with our advice, that decision alone has saved the client in excess of £30,000 a year because the price of energy had dropped, as we thought it was, once Christmas was out of the way. So with brokering, avoid engaging with people that cold call and go with a personal recommendation if you can. So that is really my simple advice on how you choose a broker. So once you're confident that you're buying energy at the right price and you've got the right strategy in place for longer term procurement, what do you do next? Well, at this point, you need to look at how much energy you are using and looking at taking out wastage of energy from the business. Now, you need to start with an energy management policy. So if you haven't got one of those, get one. In very simple terms, businesses that have an energy management policy will typically save 5% against those that don't. So with the current cost of energy, that will be a significant saving for your business. If you're unsure how to go about writing energy management policy, again, reach out to Integra. We'll get in touch with you and sort of talk you through how you get started on energy management policy. The key element, I think, here is once you've got an energy management policy in place, engage your staff, engage with the people that work within the business so they understand the energy cost, the impact that has on your business, and really get them to take on board whatever you're trying to achieve. So there will be simple things that you can do, stuff that you would have heard of from a long time ago, turning things off when they're not being used, having energy efficient light bulbs, making sure the building doesn't leak heat and doesn't leak cold when it's in the summertime. So you've got to take wastage out of the equation. A really good example, and this is pre the energy crisis, a client I was speaking to probably over 10 years ago now, they had quite a nice way of engaging their team. They decided that they wanted to reduce their energy consumption by 10%. And so they got all their decision makers, all the key people within the company saying, look, this is what we want to achieve, and we will share the difference with you. So in other words, if they achieved 10% saving, half of that saving they were going to share amongst their staff. They did achieve their saving, and so the team got a nice little bonus. I'm not suggesting that you should do that. You have to do what's right for your business, but it was an innovative way of solving a particular problem in terms of they're wanting to reduce their consumption. Once you've looked at human behavior, which is probably the easiest solution to deal with in terms of reducing your consumption, because there's no capital investment other than maybe training of your staff, then you have to look at technical issues, what is available to help you use less within the building. So something that is becoming more popular again is voltage optimization. Voltage around the UK runs at about 250 volts. So the supply into any building is 250 volts. That's an EU standard. Now, most UK equipment runs at about 225 to 230 volts. So the difference in voltage tends to go to waste. So what voltage optimization done is to reduce the supply into the building so you don't get a wastage on any electrical equipment that's being used. The payback on that would typically be 2.5 to 3 years. So it's something that's worth considering. And with the capital equipment, there are solutions where that can be paid for over a period of time. So that's a very good starting point. If you've got a spa hotel, and CHP again would be a good solution. CHP will reduce wasted heat and turn it into power. So if you've got a swimming pool, it's a really efficient way of managing how much you spend on energy. Then finally, once you've looked at all the different energy saving initiatives that are available, you then find the third part of the jigsaw is to look at how you can generate your own electricity. Obviously, solar is the most obvious one because you can see it. That can be put on to a rooftop, or if you've got land, you could maybe have a solar farm. The payback used to be about 10 years. It does vary, and we're trying to pinpoint accurately as we can where the price point's going to fall, because payback is obviously dependent on the current price of energy. So with solar, 5 years is probably about right, but also, of course, it will reduce your CO2 emissions as well. So if you're driven by CO2 emissions as the driver for your policy on energy management over and above cost, solar is a very good way to go. Wind power is very, very difficult at the moment because it's not very easy to get planning permissions. So that at the moment is probably unlikely that you'd be able to achieve wind power. So they're the three key elements. I think at this point I'd like to open up to any questions that you may have to see if we're answering and giving you the information that you need. So if you've got any questions, please do fire away.
I can see that there is one question in the chat, and is flexible procurement high risk? I don't know if this is Andy.
That's quite a common thought with regards to flexible procurement. And the answer is it depends on where we are in the market cycle. So when you're buying, the alternative to flexible procurement is fixed procurement. And what you're doing is you're making your entire purchasing decision in a single moment in time. So if you can spread that purchasing decision over a number of days, what you can do is actually reduce the risk of timing your approach to market and getting it wrong. The one exception to that is when we're at the absolute bottom of the market. Now, in all the years I've been in energy, there's only been one point when I could say we're at the absolute bottom of the market. And that was round about May 2020, during the first of the COVID lockdowns. And at that time there, the export price of US gas was cheaper than our purchase price. That is a technical impossibility, and therefore it couldn't continue. So that was a clear and obvious indicator that the market was at the bottom. At the moment, the market is not at the bottom. Most commentators expect the price to fall by around about another 30%, but we don't know over what time period because there's too many moving parts to be certain. So to answer your question, no, it's not more risky. In fact, flexible procurement reduces the risk because it means there's less chance of getting the approach to market wrong. I hope that answers the question.
Okay, and we do have another question from Ian, which is how and when should we be looking at renewing our energy contracts?
That's another question I get asked often, and people will often tell me quite confidently that it's always better to buy your energy in the summer because prices are cheaper. And that's not entirely wrong, but unfortunately, it's looking at some evidence and jumping to an incorrect conclusion. Day-ahead prices are always cheaper in the summer. Generally, not last year, but generally they're always cheaper in the summer. Now, when you're buying a fixed contract, you're not buying day-ahead, you're buying a whole year. And the suppliers know that whole year involves a summer and a winter and factor that in. In fact, pre-COVID, if you look over the previous 13 years, the best month to buy a October contract would have been in February. So what I would say to people is, rather than look at when is the best time to buy a contract, have a conversation with someone like me. Let's look at budgets and impacts on the business and decide what's the right time to go to market based on what the business can afford and what it's hoping to achieve, rather than trying to get the absolute bottom of the market. Because invariably, you follow the market down, it jumps, and somewhere on the way up, you end up getting a contract. It happens every single time. So it's about budgets, and it's about looking at the impact on the business as opposed to when is the best time to go to market, because that's a complete lottery. No one can say with certainty this is the best day.
I think, Ian, to add on a little bit to what Andy has just said, if you've got any client or have a business whose energy contracts are up for renewal, we can start looking at it a year in advance. And the most important thing before we even look at contracts is to understand what the business needs are, how many meters they've got, is it multi-site, and there's quite a lot of information we need to gather before we can even start to advise. So even if a client has got a year to run on their contracts, for us to start looking at it now would not be too early, because using the example I had of the golf club where we said wait, Andy is looking at market trends all the time. On a hourly basis, we're looking at what's happening in the energy markets, and we can predict. It might be that if a client has got their energy contracts 12 months up before they're up for renewal, it might be that it's good to renew 9 months ahead. But it might be the case that it will be 3 months ahead. So the overview from my point of view is let us look as soon as we can. Even if it's 1-2 years ahead, we can really assess the market, assess the business needs, and then advise accordingly.
To add to what you said, Nick, the worst possible situation for me to be in with a customer is when they come to me and say, my renewal's at the end of the month, what can we do? Because one, we haven't got time to go to the market. Two, the market knows they're kind of desperate and they're price takers at that point. And we can't bring to bear any of the tools we like to ensure customers are getting best value for their energy contracts.
Hope that answers the question.
There is another question in the chat from Joanne. What would the voltage optimization entail in fitting this out in the business?
The starting point with voltage optimization is to find out what the supply is already going into the building. I did one by coincidence yesterday, and the voltage supply into the building was 245 volts. There are a number of issues that we have to establish first before we can come up with a solution. But normally, if the voltage coming into the building is around 245 volts, we would expect using voltage optimization that consumption would be reduced between 5 and 10%. I would err on the cautious side, so I would suggest 5%, but it can be as high as 10. But the starting point is always, let's find out what the supply is into the building, and that's quite simply an energy monitor. You plug it in, press an orange little button, and it will give you the reading straight away. It's very, very easy to do. And then from that reading, we'll take up what needs to happen next. Right, we've got a question from Lynn. Where's the starting point if you would want to reduce your carbon footprint and to reduce costs? The starting point is looking at a year's worth of energy bills. And then this has to be an individual conversation with each business, because the criteria might be different depending on whether it's a single site or multi-site. But the first point is to find out what the energy consumption is to start with. But also you need to find out if the driving decision is based on carbon footprint, you need to know what your carbon footprint is. And there are three elements to CO2 emissions, so scope 1, 2, and 3. And as a business, you can only control about 1/3 of your CO2 emissions. You have to engage your supply chain as well. And so if you don't engage the supply chain, you're not going to get to net zero. So in terms of reducing carbon footprint, a lot of the issues will absolutely mirror managing consumption, which is energy management policy, reducing consumption, embracing renewables. So they're the three key elements. In terms of then reducing carbon footprint to aim to net zero, it's engaging the supply chain. And have you got anything you'd like to add on that one?
Pretty much to mirror what you said, Nicholas. Of the stage one is to first of all understand what your current carbon footprint is, to engage someone to look at your scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, because unless you can measure it, you can't do anything about it. So you need to know where you are to start with, and then go through a series of exercises to reduce that. There are tools out there to help you identify which projects to look at first, either in terms of a CapEx or carbon reduction. And then it's about, I think the critical part of a carbon reduction or net zero process is net zero is the goal, but the key part is the journey. If everyone needs to start reducing their carbon, a number of companies say, I can't get to net zero. Well, you just do it one step at a time. Do what you can, do the small stuff first, and drive that carbon down as much as you can. That's all I've already got to say on that.
Okay, thank you, Andy. I hope that answers your question, Lynn. And we have a really interesting question from Andrew, asking us to explain our respective roles. Do we work together? Are we both options in terms of who we talk to about future energy procurement? Nice question. I will do my best to answer you. HBSL is engaged with Integra. So we are the go-to guys for businesses within the hospitality arena who would like their energy managed. HBSL is an independent consultancy that will work with Integra to give best advice to our clients. HBSL in turn works with a series of aggregators and brokers, of which Andy is one. So the starting point would be you'd talk to Integra and HBSL. And then once that conversation has been had, I would then work in tandem with Andy or another colleague of mine, Andrew, who have got specialisms in their own area. But from my perspective, the key element is we give independent, impartial advice. So Andy's expertise is dealing with the industrial and commercial sectors, so that tends to be larger users from 1 million kilowatts a year in terms of annual consumption upwards. And Andy's business also has a separate leg that advises on energy management in terms of reducing CO2 emissions.
The key to my role, Nick, is really to reduce the exposure to risk of the energy market. The energy market is always going to be volatile. It's always going to be difficult to navigate. And my role is to help customers secure contracts at the right price and right time for them. We are fully independent. We don't have preferred suppliers. And as I said earlier, every conversation starts with a blank piece of paper and is tailored to the customer's needs. And critically, we are 100% transparent when it comes to fees and costs.
That is actually an important point, which I didn't mention when I talked about how do you choose a broker. I said choose one that's by personal recommendation rather than somebody that's cold calls and tries to put you under pressure. Any good broker will disclose how they earn their money. On our letter of authorities, we publish it, and I find that being transparent brings trust, and that's what we try to do, is to give the best advice we can for our clients. So, Andrew, I hope that answers the question that you were asking. Nice question too. Thanks for that one. Any further questions? Andy's presentation, when it's done on a one-to-one basis, can be up to an hour and a half because the complexities of the energy market are extreme. And so today was very much an edited version. If you'd like a more detailed one-on-one insight into what Andy does, that can be arranged again. Just reach out to Integra and they will arrange it through HBSL, which, by the way, stands for helping business spend less. That's what we aim to achieve. And I can't see any more questions. We're coming up to 50 minutes. I hope that today has been useful. Anything that comes to mind, often it's when you put the phone down, you then remember what you wanted to ask. So if anybody's can't think of a question now but wants to ask one at a later date, reach out to Mariana and we'll get in touch to you. So I think, unless there are more questions, we're done.
Perfect. Yeah, if anyone wants to reach out, they can reach out through their account director if they're current clients, or if you are in talk with one of our sales development, you can reach out to them and we will put you directly in contact with Nicholas and HBSL. But thank you very much, everyone, for joining today.
Thank you.
Andy and Nicholas for today. It's been really appreciated.
You're welcome. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks. Bye-bye.